prowled like a beast across the northern Ural Mountains, sculpting the snow into jagged ridges and curling drifts. In that vast white wilderness, there was no shelter, no village, no warmth, no mercy. Just ice, wind, and silence. It was early 1959. The Soviet Union, shrouded in Cold War secrecy and whispers, paid little attention to 9 young hikers preparing for an expedition. But history would remember them. Igor Dyatlov, 23, was the leader. A radio engineering student, calm, brilliant, and determined. With him were 8 companions, fellow students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. All were experienced hikers. All were young, full of spirit, humor, and dreams. They left Sverdlovsk, now Ekaterinburg, on January 23, heading north by train, truck, and foot toward the icy ridges of the Ural Mountains. Their goal, reach Otorten, a remote peak whose name in the local Mansi language meant, "Don't go there." The warnings were ancient. The forest, older still. They kept detailed diaries and snapped dozens of photographs. They joked about the cold, played games in the snow, and even wrote a parody newspaper, Evening Otorten, filled with inside jokes and exaggerated stories about their own bravery. There was laughter in those mountains, even as the wind deepened and the sky grew dim. Their names. Yuri Doroshenko, the bold one, always eager to test his strength. Ludmila Dubinina, tough, intelligent, often serious, but with a sharp wit. Zinaida Kolmogorova, warm and beloved by all. Rustam Slobodin, athletic and strong-willed. Alexander Kolevatov, the quiet thinker. Yuri Krivonischenko, cheerful and musical. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, charming, half-French, with an engineer's mind. Semyon Zolotaryov, older, a veteran of World War II, and new to the group. And lastly, Yuri Yudin, the 10th hiker, who turned back early due to illness. He was the only one who would survive. On February 1, they pitched their final camp on the windswept slope of Kholat Syakhl, a name that meant, Mountain of the Dead. That night, the wind screamed. And something in the forest answered. When the hikers failed to return by February 12, no one panicked at first. Delays were common. But by the 20th, worry had turned to dread. Rescue teams were dispatched, volunteers, students, military personnel, and local Mansi hunters. On February 26, they found the tent. It was half-collapsed, covered in snow. The canvas had been slashed open from the inside. Boots were neatly arranged. Backpacks, supplies, even jackets, untouched. No blood. No signs of struggle. But outside, in the snow, were footprints. Bare feet. Socks. A single boot. 9 sets, descending the slope away from the tent, toward the black line of trees over a kilometer away. Whatever had happened, it had driven them out into the freezing wilderness, in the dead of night, underdressed, and in apparent terror. But from what? Under a towering cedar tree at the forest's edge, 2 bodies lay huddled in the snow, Yuri Krivonischenko and Georgy Doroshenko. Stripped to their underwear, their hands burned, perhaps from trying to keep a fire going, or from tearing through branches above them. The bark above them was broken and clawed, as if someone had climbed, or tried to escape something below. Between the tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found. Igor Dyatlov, face turned toward the camp, fists clenched. Zina Kolmogorova, crawling through the snow. Rustam Slobodin, his skull fractured, as if he'd fallen, or been struck. They had died trying to return. But it was 2 months later, in May, when the last 4 were found, buried under meters of snow, in a ravine beyond the cedar tree. And what was found, changed everything. These final 4 were better dressed, suggesting they'd survived longer, or recovered clothing from the others. But the condition of their bodies shocked even the hardened searchers. Ludmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, her lips, and part of her face. Semyon Zolotaryov's chest had been crushed inward with massive force, as if hit by a speeding car, yet his skin was unbroken. Thibaut Brignol's skull was shattered. Alexander Kolevatov was found oddly intact, his expression frozen in calm. Medical examiners were baffled. The injuries were not consistent with avalanche, nor with any known environmental hazard. No one had defensive wounds. There were no signs of attack. And most chillingly, traces of radiation were found on their clothes. The Soviet government swiftly closed the case. Official conclusion: an unknown compelling force. What did that mean? No one could say. Theories exploded like wildfire. Avalanche? No snow displacement. No consistent trauma. The tent was still partially standing. Infrasound? Some scientists speculated a rare wind phenomenon may have caused panic-inducing low-frequency sounds. Military testing? Parachute mines, chemical weapons, or classified experiments, plausible, yet never confirmed. UFOs? Several witnesses nearby reported orange lights in the sky that night. Monsi shamanic revenge? Locals were ruled out early, but the eerie name, Mountain of the Dead, lingered like a curse. Even now, decades later, new theories emerge, some scientific, some chillingly supernatural. But none have answered the simplest, most terrible question. What terrified 9 strong, intelligent young people so deeply, they fled barefoot into a frozen death? Today, the Dyatlov Pass remains one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in modern history. The ravine where the final bodies were found is now called the Den. The slope where they camped is marked by a memorial, buried each winter in fresh snow. Hikers who pass through the area report strange sensations, the sound of voices on the wind, equipment malfunctioning, and shapes in the trees that disappear when approached. Some say they never left. That 9 restless souls still wander the white wilderness, frozen between worlds, replaying their final moments in a loop. Others believe the forest itself is alive. That the mountain remembers what happened. And that one day, it will happen again. Yuri Yudin, the only survivor, lived a long, quiet life. He spent his final years haunted not by what he knew, but by what he didn't. He once said, "If I had a chance to ask God one question, it would be, what really happened to my friends that night?" He died in 2013, never knowing the answer. Maybe no one ever will. But in the snows of Kholat Syakhl, the wind still howls. And the forest never tells. Tucked in the folds of the Appalachian Mountains, hidden behind a curtain of pines and fog, lies a stretch of woods the locals call Black Pines Hollow. It doesn't show up on modern maps. No signs point the way. If you ask the people of nearby Ashbourne, they'd only offer you silence, or a vague warning not to go up past the old mill road. But if you stayed long enough, drank with the old-timers in the back of O'Malley's Tavern, you might hear the name spoken in hushed tones. The Hollow Grove. A clearing deep in the woods where the trees don't grow right. Where the air feels thick. Where people vanish. They say the forest watches. And sometimes, it calls you by name. In the summer of 1996, Eleanor Marks, a 28-year-old wildlife photographer and native of Ashbourne, walked into Black Pines Hollow and never came out. She had been studying strange animal behavior near the edge of the forest. Raccoons circling endlessly, deer found without eyes but otherwise untouched, birds dive-bombing into trees. Her last known location was near the ridge above the Hollow Grove. Weeks later, a hunter stumbled across her backpack at the base of a moss-covered hill. Inside was her camera, half its film exposed, and a leather-bound field journal, its final pages smeared and hastily written. "Something's wrong with the trees. I heard my mother's voice last night. But she's been dead for 5 years. There are lights, but no source. Eyes in the trees. I'm not alone." Authorities launched a search. Dogs refused to go past the tree line. compasses spun. No trace of Eleanor was ever found. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. In 2001, a team of 3 paranormal investigators from Raleigh arrived in Ashbourne. They were chasing the legend of Hollow Grove and planned a 3-night stay. Locals tried to dissuade them. Told them about the screams people sometimes heard echoing down the hills at night, about the figures seen standing perfectly still in the tree line at dawn. The team laughed it off. Brought cameras, drones, meters. Technology. They entered the woods on a Wednesday. Only 2 came back, shaken, silent, unwilling to speak of what they'd seen. The third, Miles Becker, was never found. Their footage, recovered from a partially melted memory card, showed little at first: trees, night vision shots, interviews. But then things turned strange. In one clip, Miles stared at the camera, whispering, "There's something inside the trees. Watching us. Breathing with us." Then static. Then silence. In the final frame, someone, or something, was behind him. Tall. Thin. Wrong. I never believed in that kind of thing. I was a skeptic. A writer. Always looking for local folklore to twist into fiction. That changed in October of 2018, when I went to Ashbourne to research for a book. I found the story of Eleanor Marks. Dug into the Becker footage. Interviewed the bartender who saw them last. And despite every warning, I entered Black Pines Hollow. I went in at 3:17 p.m. I remember that detail because I checked my watch when the trail vanished, not faded, vanished, as if the forest had rearranged itself behind me. The light dimmed quickly. Trees blocked out the sun like curtains. Every step I took sounded like it echoed into some vast emptiness. No wind. No birds. Just my breath. Then came the whisper. Faint. Feminine. "Please, help me." I turned, heart pounding. No one. Just trees. Still and silent. Then I heard it again. Closer. "Help me. I'm cold." I followed the sound, maybe 100 yards, into a circular clearing. That's when I found it. The Hollow Grove wasn't like the rest of the forest. The trees there were tall, blackened, and completely silent. No leaves rustled. No undergrowth stirred. At the center stood a single dead tree. White as bone, with long limbs like outstretched fingers. Beneath it, scattered like offerings, were objects: a child's shoe, a broken watch, a faded scarf, a camera with no lens. As I stepped closer, the air changed. The ground pulsed beneath my feet, subtle, like a heartbeat in the soil. And then came the scent. Earth, yes, but mixed with something old. Decay. Dust. Ash. I reached out and touched the white tree's bark. Immediately, I was overwhelmed by grief. Sorrow not my own. Images flashed, faces I didn't know, eyes wide with fear, running through the dark. Hands clawing at the ground. A voice, Eleanor's, whispering. "You shouldn't have come." I stumbled back. And then came the footsteps. Deliberate. Crunching across leaves. Just behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because I knew, in the way you just know, that if I looked, I wouldn't come back. I ran. The forest bent around me, the path shifting like a dream. Every tree looked the same, every shadow too long. My flashlight flickered. My thoughts blurred. Somehow, I found the ridge again. When I burst out of the trees, it was just after dawn. I had been inside for over 14 hours, but my phone said only 23 minutes had passed. My skin was cold. My ears rang. And etched into my palm was a mark, thin, red, and unmistakably shaped like a tree. I still have it. I never published the book. I deleted the footage. Sometimes I hear Eleanor's voice in my dreams, soft, distant, echoing like wind through bare branches. Sometimes I see the white tree when I close my eyes. The people of Ashbourne still don't speak of Hollow Grove. Not loudly. And they still lose people. One every few years. A hunter. A teen. A photographer. Some say the forest takes what it's owed. Others believe it protects something ancient, something that isn't meant to be disturbed. Whatever the truth is, I've learned one thing. There are places in this world where the rules don't apply. Where memory and time bend like trees in the wind. And if you hear your name whispered in the woods, don't follow. It was the fall of 1945 when Martha Wright, a young woman from Bennington, Vermont, decided to take a short hike in the woods near Glastonbury Mountain, nestled in the heart of the infamous Bennington Triangle. With its dense forests, secluded trails, and rugged terrain, it was the kind of place people ventured into for peace and quiet. Yet, it was also a place that would soon become known for something far darker. Martha, like many before her, ventured into the forest that day with no real sense of dread. She had heard the stories of strange disappearances in the area, but like most, she chalked them up to superstition or misfortune. She was a seasoned hiker and had visited these woods countless times. What she didn't know, however, was that the Bennington Triangle, named for the unexplained and eerie disappearances that had occurred in the area, held a malevolent secret, one that had already claimed several lives. That day, the sun was beginning to dip behind the trees as Martha made her way deeper into the forest. But as she reached the edge of a particularly dense patch of trees, a sudden, unsettling quiet seemed to fall over the area. The birds stopped singing, and the usual rustle of wind through the leaves was replaced by an eerie silence. Martha took a few more steps, then paused, sensing something wasn't quite right. The world around her seemed to close in, as if the very forest itself had drawn her into its suffocating embrace. It was at that moment that she heard it, a faint, muffled noise. At first, she thought it was the sound of someone calling her name. But the longer she stood there, the more the sound seemed to come from all directions, a disembodied echo that grew louder and more frantic. It wasn't long before she realized that she couldn't hear her own footsteps. It was as if she wasn't alone, but no one was there. Martha Wright disappeared that day. She was never seen again, and no trace of her was ever found. Local authorities scoured the forest for days, combing through the dense undergrowth and calling out for her, but it was as if the earth itself had swallowed her whole. And so, Martha became one of the first mysterious disappearances in what would later be called the Bennington Triangle. The Bennington Triangle, an area covering a roughly 40-square-mile stretch of dense forests, rugged mountains, and hidden valleys in southwestern Vermont, would go on to claim more victims in the coming years. 1 year after Martha's disappearance, in November of 1946, James Tedford, a World War II veteran, was traveling on a bus from St. Albans, Vermont, back to Bennington. He had been visiting family and was eager to return home. When the bus reached the Bennington area, James was nowhere to be found. The other passengers on the bus had seen him moments before the bus reached its final stop. He had been sitting in his seat, staring out the window, but when the bus arrived at the station, James was gone. His suitcase was still there, resting on the seat next to him, but James had disappeared without a trace. No one saw him leave the bus, and there was no sign of a struggle or any indication of where he could have gone. James Tedford was never found. As time passed, the mystery of the Bennington Triangle continued to grow, with more and more unexplained disappearances. But it wasn't until 1950 that the case that would haunt the region the most occurred. Paul Jepson, a young boy of 8 years old, was playing near his home with his mother in a secluded area close to the Glastonbury Mountains. His mother, Dorothy Jepson, had stepped away for just a moment to attend to something nearby. When she returned, she found that her son was gone. Paul's disappearance was eerily similar to the others. He had been right next to his mother just moments before, but when she turned around, he was nowhere to be found. She called out for him, but there was no response. Searching frantically, Dorothy found no sign of Paul, no footprints in the soft earth, and no sign of struggle. The search for Paul Jepson lasted for weeks, with local authorities and volunteers combing the surrounding woods and mountains. But despite the extensive search, Paul was never found, and no clues ever emerged to explain his disappearance. The disappearances of Martha, James, and Paul weren't the only cases. Over the course of several decades, more individuals would vanish under equally mysterious circumstances. All of them were last seen near the dense forests of the Bennington Triangle. Some were experienced hikers, others were people just passing through. But they all shared one thing in common: they disappeared without a trace. One such case was that of Frances Fanny Andrews, a schoolteacher from Bennington, who vanished in 1950 while hiking along a trail on the outskirts of the woods. Her disappearance was as sudden and inexplicable as the others. The search for Fanny lasted weeks, but nothing was ever found. Her body was never discovered, and her story has become one of the most chilling mysteries in Vermont's history. Local rumors started circulating about the cause of these disappearances. Some claimed the disappearances were due to natural forces, the rugged terrain, the wild animals, the extreme weather. But others spoke of something far darker. Over the years, theories emerged to explain the disappearances, but none of them were ever conclusively proven. Some speculated that the disappearances were the work of a serial killer, someone who was lurking in the woods, preying on innocent hikers and travelers. But there was no evidence to support this, and many believed that the pattern of disappearances was far too strange to be the result of a single person's actions. Others speculated that there were supernatural forces at work, something ancient and malevolent, tied to the very land itself. Some believed that the Bennington Triangle was cursed, that the mountain was haunted by restless spirits, or even that the area was the site of some kind of portal to another world. The most popular theory, however, was that the disappearances were the work of a mysterious creature, perhaps a Bigfoot or something even more sinister, lurking in the deep, shadowed corners of the forest, waiting for its next victim. But no theory ever fully explained the eerie and chilling nature of the Bennington Triangle. And as time went on, the legend grew. To this day, the Bennington Triangle remains one of the most chilling and mysterious places in the United States. Despite years of investigations, there are no answers to the many disappearances that occurred there. The dense, isolated forests and mountains continue to haunt those who hear its tale. Every year, hikers, tourists, and paranormal investigators still visit the area, trying to uncover the truth behind the disappearances. Some leave with strange feelings of unease, others claim to have heard unsettling noises, seen inexplicable shadows, or felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. But one thing remains undeniable: the Bennington Triangle is a place of mystery, a place where the boundary between the known and the unknown is thin, and where the unexplainable lurks just beyond the trees. No one can say for sure what happened to those who disappeared, but the whispers of the lost continue to echo in the forest, haunting those who dare to enter.